instructional tool is the subject of my doctoral dissertation, which I'm working on right now. All right, so I like experimenting with all kinds of different technology. I've done a number of things over the years. I chose to focus today on the one that I've used the most, that I have the most experience with, and by far the most robust data for. And it's how I use Twitter in my classrooms. I have used it in primarily two classes, the two parts of American history, U.S. History Part 1, which is History 1410, and U.S. History Part 2, which is History 1430. I have used it in 9 classes up through the spring, including 4 online classes. As you may or may not know, Twitter has a 140 character limit for every tweet that you send out. That's not 140 words, it's 140 characters. So that makes it very limited in what you can do. Now, some have argued, including some people on my dissertation committee, who have said, wait a second, isn't that making students worse writers? There seems to be this tendency to think that as students are texting from their phones or they're writing tweets, they're not actually doing writing that's productive because it's short, or that it's making people generally bad writers. Yes, that's true. We tend to think of the text message with all these abbreviations and shortened words that you can't understand, but that's why one of the things that I do in the way I scaffold Twitter into my classes is I make sure that students understand that any tweet they write in the course of my class has to be understandable. I have to be able to read. The other piece, and this is held up by a mountain of literature at this point, is that social media technologies generally, and Twitter in particular, there's a lot of evidence to indicate that it increases student engagement in the course. Okay? So the idea of extending the course beyond the classroom, you know, that's not necessarily an idea that students love. You know, the idea that they think they're going to have class 7 days a week or what have you. That's not necessarily an idea that they really jump on board with right away. But that's why I try to make it so that the way I use Twitter is not overly onerous in terms of the burden that it places on them. Now, why Twitter? Well, I had been, before I started using it, I had been on Twitter for about a year. I found it a very intriguing medium, and it's been an up-and-coming thing. You know, the more we see hashtags and all these things for TV shows and sporting events, it's certainly become a more ubiquitous part of life in America in the 21st century. It's free to sign up. Obviously, it's well known. It's easy to access. You can access it from any mobile device. You can access it from a desktop computer. Even from an old phone that's not a smartphone, that is not internet ready, you can access Twitter through text messaging. Okay? And that's, of course, students, if they have a data plan that makes them pay for text messages, that might be an issue. But then whenever that question has come up, I always say to students, well, there's the computer lab. If you're in an online class, you're on a computer anyways. The Twitter app from your desktop is free. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to access it on a regular basis. And finally, and this was an important one that I did not think about right away when I first started using Twitter, but the concept of student privacy, of course. Now, I always said, don't tweet private stuff. Don't tell me about your doctor's appointment or anything like that. Don't ask me about grades on Twitter. I always said that. You don't have to give them your real name. You don't have to give them any real information. You can make up an alias that's totally false and fake. The only thing is that I need to know what your Twitter username so I can evaluate you. That's it. I require students to tweet 5 times a week. That's not a lot, obviously. And most of the time, I encourage them to tweet in response to me. In some cases, instructors will make Twitter more free-flowing. I tend to make it more formalized in that I ask questions. Sometimes I don't ask questions. Sometimes I'll send them a link to a website that I think is relevant to that week's topic. So I send out 10 to 12 tweets a week, and they are all aligned to the course outcomes. They're specifically aligned to the material we're covering that week, the textbook, and the course outcomes. And I usually ask questions that pertain to that week's assignments. So I'm trying to guide them towards completing the assignments and doing well on them, hopefully. They do get a grade for it. It's 10% of their overall grade, but I don't grade on the quality of content. They have to tweet 5 times a week, and at first that's all I said. Then I realized they were all trying to put 5 tweets in one day. I said that defeats the purpose. So then the next semester I said you only get credit for 2 tweets per day. That makes it so that in a course of a 7-day week, they have to come back 3 days. I don't think that's too much considering in a face-to-face class we're going to meet twice anyways, and then 1 additional day they'd have to come back and do it. So they'll have to do it over 3 days, and then the tweets just have to be readable. And I try to interact with the students when I can. It's impossible in a class of 25 students to interact with them constantly. I tell students, if you're incorrect, if you say something that's wrong, I'm going to correct you, gently of course. If you say something that I find particularly insightful, I will point that out. I will retweet that to the rest of the class often, okay? But if they say something and they just answer a simple question with a simple answer and it's correct, for the most part I leave that alone. But I do try to go out of my way to try to interact with each student at least once over the course of a week. Now, how do I keep track of all this? And this is where the iPad comes in, called Hootsuite. Now, I have 5 Twitter accounts. So there's a tendency to, I have a private one, my own personal one. I have one that I use to follow, educators and educational technologists and all that. Then I have my class Twitter feeds. One of the things in the literature says that you should have specific Twitter feeds devoted to particular classes. This is the home feed. This is all the tweets pertaining to the class. The reason I use Hootsuite is it enables me to schedule tweets ahead of time. You can't do that with the native Twitter app. And then this one over here is the mentions, because sometimes students forget to put, they don't reply to me or something goes amiss. This makes it where I see, so I can see every tweet that's being sent to me in the context of the class. So I can come in here and you'll see that the yellow ones, I'm HST 1410 with the picture of Abraham Lincoln as the icon. But you can see here all the different things, the way this is set up, and I can use the iPad wherever I'm at to reply to students using Hootsuite. I also have it on the desktop, which is more robust. The desktop application for Hootsuite enables me to schedule tweets ahead of time for a small fee, which I have paid before, but I'm not paying right now. I can go in and schedule all 120 tweets that I'm going to send out in the course of a semester using Microsoft Excel. Hootsuite allows that kind of functionality. But this is actually a pretty good function, so if I wanted to go in and respond to this student, it pulls it up here. I can type reply, and I can type in whatever, and reply to the student, and it'll send it out. And sometimes students get into debates back and forth about historical topics. I get involved sometimes I let them do it. If I don't involve myself all the time unless I really feel that it's necessary, but this desktop client enables me to keep track of everything that's going on. I also can use it on my phone. This is what Hootsuite looks like on my phone. It's more simple. I only do this if I'm out and about and I have one that I can respond to quickly. And here's a screen cap of the desktop app, which you can see is much more robust. It's got the different tabs up here at the top of all my different Twitter accounts. Okay. And everything you got listed here. This is the good and the bad. The good part about this is if I'm expecting students to be engaged with the course over more than just the hour and a half that we're sitting in a classroom, I have to also be engaged. But through Twitter and email, of course, but mainly through Twitter, if they have questions, like the night an assignment's due, that happens a fair amount. The night an essay or something is due, they'll tweet to me and they'll ask a question, do I need to do this, or how do I cite my sources or whatever. I can usually respond to them very quickly. I keep a Google Drive and Dropbox on my iPad, so if I'm using my iPad, it's actually easier than on the desktop. I can tweet them back with a link to the document that I'm referring them to that will help them cite their sources or whatever. I can send them that document right away. Using Hootsuite, it's pretty easy to do. This is the downside. It does require time. One semester I tried to do Twitter in 3 classes, and it was a nightmare. It was too much. It was too much to keep track of. It was too many tweets that I had to schedule and post. Too much activity. It was really difficult. 1 is great because you can really focus on it. 2 works okay, especially now I've been doing it long enough to where I sort of have I kept a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet with all the tweets I've ever sent out, and now I can sort of pick the tweets that I want to send that already have set up and vetted hyperlinks. I just have to check to make sure the link is active, that type of thing. Another thing is, should this be graded? There's no consensus in this on the literature and the research on this. I've always graded it, but I don't grade content. I grade effort. And I tell students, I'm very explicit, I say, you're not losing points if you're wrong. You're not getting points if you're right. It's just the effort of doing it and coming here and letting me guide you toward the course content, letting me, interacting with your classmates, that type of thing. Another thing is, students really need scaffolding. I don't require Twitter right away. I always have 2 weeks built into the early semester where they don't have to use Twitter yet. I spend some time in class talking about it. I have a video in my online classes that I have students watch that sort of walk them through the process of getting an account, how they're supposed to use it, how I use Twitter, and what generally other students have done in the past. Now, like I said, the research literature is very clear that Twitter is an engagement booster. As far as learning, here's what I've discovered. Now, this is over. So at the top you see online course, no Twitter, online class with Twitter, face-to-face class, no Twitter, face-to-face class with Twitter. Okay. Now if you scroll down to the bottom, you see pass rate, failure rate, dropout rate. Pass rate defined as percentage of students who completed the class with a grade of A, B, or C. Failure rate defined as percentage of students who completed the class with a grade of D or F. And then dropout rate is not what we might consider in higher ed the full dropout rate, because I don't count students who enrolled but then officially withdrew. My dropout rate here, because I never kept track of that, unfortunately. So my dropout rate is, I go back here. My dropout rate is students who stayed enrolled but who did not finish the class, typically because they didn't take the final exam. Now, because I use Twitter differently in different semesters, this is not the sort of thing I could take really and publish, because it's not statistically significant. I didn't get consent and all that stuff. But for our purposes, note here that in the online classes without Twitter to the online classes with Twitter, note the much lower dropout rate and the much lower failure rate. Well, not much lower, but lower by some. Again, because it would be a validity problem if we were trying to make too broad of conclusions across this. But you can very clearly see that something is going on here, potentially. Okay, it's not as pronounced in the face-to-face. It looks like it's there, but it's not totally convincing in the face-to-face classes, which I found interesting when I started digging through this data, which I've always kept track of. Okay, keeping track of this data made me go, all right, what's going on here? Are students really learning? Or are they just being more engaged? So actually next semester I'm going to embark on my dissertation research, and I'm actually going to try to find out whether or not students are actually using Twitter as a viable learning tool. Are they actually learning from Twitter? Does that translate to their if they perform on Twitter, will that translate to their performance on what I call traditional assessments? Multiple choice questions, writing identifications, writing essays, that type of thing. I'm really curious to see what comes out of that. As I said before, I've very clearly seen that this is a more effective tool in online courses, and in the future, I'm not as enthusiastic about using it in face-to-face classes, because I have the benefit of interacting with the students on a regular basis. It seems to be more effective in online classes, which makes sense when you think about the alienation that students can often feel, the isolation that students can feel in an online class.